What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby here with Emery Cuzzy. Today we're going to go over the top free agents in this class. We don't have a ranking because it's just way too much work for something that's just way too fluid. So we're just basically something that we're going to do for the first time is just kind of screen share and scroll through NFL.com's 101 free agents. We're not saying, oh, this guy's too high or too low. We're just kind of going to briskly go over each one, not each one, but some of the guys that we think are of note. And just
guys.
Give you an idea of what to expect this free agency period, which will be starting next Wednesday, I believe at 3:00 Central Time. But yeah.
Yeah, so it started off, we have one of the best D linemen in football. You can see him on the screen. It's Chris Jones. He is got to come back to Kansas City. They've got to find a way to get him there. He's going to take a cap hit. He's going to be expensive, but at the same time, you notice the difference with this holdout. He was out for his one game last year, and it was like Kansas City can't stop the run. All of a sudden, they were having difficulty doing anything defensively. So he's a priority. He should be back in a red jersey. That's how I feel.
Right. Yeah. I early in our franchise type video didn't call him the number one free agent. He is the number one free agent. But the reason I didn't say that was because Chris Jones, I don't anticipate going anywhere.
Yeah.
He is going to be the highest defensive lineman in football. But I think it's Kansas City that is going to realize we cannot let this guy walk for nothing. He's just way too important. He made way too many plays down the stretch. He shows up when it matters. Best defensive player in football, in my opinion, at the very moment. This is the last big contract, so you got to pay him, but sometimes you just got to bite the bullet on some guys.
Yeah, it's a warranted contract. It's not like he has all the stats, he has all the accolades, he's done it in big games. Pay the man. Let's move on.
Right.
So
yeah, and we move on to Kirk. He's one that's very recently started to become very interesting, just because in our first mock, we projected him to re-sign with Minnesota. Now there's rumblings that he could be moving his family to Atlanta. There's ties there. There's mutual respect. It sounds like Atlanta might have him as their plan A. Very interesting turn of events, I think, but also it comes with risk.
Yeah.
If you look at his age, by the way, these ages are the start of the season. This isn't what they currently are. So he will be 36 to start the year. On top of that, he's coming off an Achilles injury. We are seeing quicker recoveries, and quarterback's not really a position where it's as big of a concern.
Right.
But you just never know. It's a risk for a reason. He'll be a polarizing one for sure, because he is going to get a big deal, one way or the other. In the short term, long term remains to be seen, but people are going to look at that cap and be like, wow, that's ridiculous. But he's earned it.
Yeah.
I think he's gotten a reputation for guys that doesn't show up in big games. He had such a absurd start of primetime games that the team ended up losing, and a lot of that has been on Kirk. And
of course.
But in the last few years, most comebacks in 2022, 13-0 in one-score games.
Crazy stats.
Obviously, can't be repeated, but he was a large part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then he was playing his best football when he went down, and they started on a win streak after a slow start. We'll just kind of see what happens, but that's he's probably one of the most interesting free agents for sure.
Well, I think grouping the quarterbacks just into one thing here, there are a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. And we know we've talked about the draft. The draft is pretty deep with quarterbacks. We're probably going to see multiple young quarterbacks starting from this draft class this next year. But yeah, Kirk is definitely the one free agent that is like, okay, that guy can, is going to come in and probably not, you're going to feel good about him week one. There's also Russ, who is probably going to play on the minimum. But yeah, the quarterback class for this free agency is actually really small, but it's really big when you think of draft plus Justin Fields plus those types of guys. So I think Kirk is definitely warranted though to come in and be a number one guy. It's going to be his last contract, but here we go.
Yeah, and these next two guys, obviously big names that we'll kind of group together because I think they both provide very instant impact for whoever does sign with them, because I do believe that both of them will be on new teams next fall. Christian Wilkins coming off a career year, 61 pressures, just ridiculous. Danielle Hunter, after holdouts and franchise tags, 16 and a half career highs in sacks. And obviously, both of them look to be moving on right in their prime, dead middle of their prime. So one thing that I'd like to ask you is there somebody, I know they do play different positions, but somebody that you would probably prioritize over the other?
Price wise, you're going to get Christian Wilkins probably for cheaper. But I think personally, we have seen edges translate from team to team so well.
Right.
We were talking about that in our last video. Khalil Mack, as soon as he left the Raiders, went to Chicago and was perfectly fine. Didn't even miss his steps. So edge rushing is one of the most important things in football. Creating sacks, being able to create sacks. So I think that that's probably where I would put my money if I had to pick. But that is not saying that, Christian Wilkins isn't going to be an absolute game changer. He is, he makes every locker room better. He makes every defensive line 10 times better immediately. So it's just one of those things where you just have to prioritize as a team also what you have. And then if you're like, okay, well, we have one solid edge, let me go get the D lineman that's going to create pressure up the middle and things like that. Right. But both of them are really great players. So picking one is really hard because they're going to both be, premier players at wherever they go.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with either one. They're both going to get big deals. Two teams are going to be very happy, or one team, who knows?
Wow.
That would be pretty sick. But and then we'll just kind of scurry down the list. One that I'm not too happy about, Tyron Smith moving on. It sounds like he just had a career, I wouldn't say a career year, but a career resurgence after a bunch of injury-plagued seasons. Took a pay cut, and then also just was the best tackle in football this year. He was actually one of the most underpaid. He's due for his deal. Dallas should have paid him, and they're not. And so any team that needs to tackle, just raise your hand, come on down.
And there's
you're gonna get a great guy.
Yeah.
That the way he plays is something that is sustainable for a long career. We've seen Trent Williams, late 30s, Jason Peters as examples that are elite tackles and stay that way for a long time. But also, he comes with a little bit of injury history. So you can't sign him expecting that he's going to be available all 17, ideally 18, 19, 20 games for your team. But, if you get the 13 to 14 threshold, and then when it counts, that's really what's going to be a big difference, and he will be a game changer for you in the postseason.
Yeah, I think that he's definitely deserving of the big payday. There are a lot of tackle needy teams, so it's not like he's not going to find a home. There's always going to be tackle needy teams. There's, he's just a great player, and it's really sad to see him have to leave Dallas, but when ownership doesn't exactly do you right, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly.
So
and we'll kind of move on just because we got a bunch of guys that we want to get to. Saquon Barkley, loaded running back class on free agency, probably the deepest position, and also coincidentally is one of the positions that a lot of times you get the biggest bargain for. And he's the one that's in his prime, and he is still, to me, a top 5-6 running back in football.
For sure.
So he's one that I know he will get paid by somebody. We'll see who wants to take that investment. We've seen Houston as guys that could be a possibility. Vegas likes the Giants to resign him for some reason. We'll see, but he's one of those few that I would be willing to invest in a larger contract for because of his over the top ability and the way to break one out of nowhere.
Yeah, he's a special athlete, and he has going to get you 15+ yard plays pretty consistently, as long as he goes to a team that uses him correctly. My thing too, he's probably better than what we expect him to be because he played on the Giants, and the Giants didn't really help him thrive. So hopefully he goes to a team, which I expect him to, because I expect him to want to win also.
Right.
That's why Houston makes a lot of sense, because they have the money. They are in a win now situation, and in that situation, he will thrive because he's not the focal point necessarily. Like, he will be, of course, the running back that gets the ball, 18 plus times. But there you have, a really good quarterback that can get the ball out to a bunch of different receivers that have been playing well. He will be just a piece in the offense, and that will allow him to be that much better.
Right. I mean, they were able to have down the stretch Devin Singletary, 5'7" Devin Singletary, 30 touches for 150 all-purpose yards.
Yeah.
Like, just imagine what you have this brute with mammoth tree trunk thighs. Just like I said, take the top off the defense.
Yeah.
It's the perfect situation for him. I do expect him to move on from New York. If it's not Houston, I'm sure it will be a team that could utilize the services pretty well.
Well, one thing, I mean, he's probably the highest rated running back ever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was the number 2 overall pick for a reason. He's not that old.
Yeah.
He has, one real injury in his career?
Yeah, torn ACL very early in his season, recovered, and then he had a sprained ankle, which is not something that you should be, he's injured from. Look at Christian McCaffrey. He had 2 straight years of hamstring and then a sprained ankle, re-aggravated it, and again, comes to San Fran, helps them get
to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So I don't want to hear the all the time of the Isaiah Pacheco's can win the Super Bowl. Yes, but you still got to find the guy.
Right.
You still have to make it work with the guy that you have. But there's only a select few that are this talented.
Yeah.
And usually you don't see them in their prime entering free agency. That's kind of what we see with them.
I can think of 5, maybe, that I'm like, okay, they can do it all. You know, 70% of the touches type of guys. So, yeah, Saquon's going to be worth whatever price tag he's paid.
Mm-hmm. And so we'll kind of skip down the list. One that I think is a little high for what I would rank him, doesn't matter. But Jonathan Greenard had a career high 12.5 sacks. He was a compliment to Will Anderson as a rookie, but he led the team in sacks, one of the highest in pressure rate, and he's kind of one that's just 1 year wonder. They signed him for a cheap deal. He paid off. He's going to make a lot of money because of his career year. But do you invest in him as much as you're going to have to?
On this list, Danielle Hunter's number 4. 3 picks, 3 guys later, we got Greenard. So
that just shows the drop off.
Yeah, I think that the problem isn't like, if you don't have an edge and you have to invest in somebody, invest in the draft. To me, because that's how I would do personally. Because you're going to have to overpay him in this situation, and I don't think that is necessarily worth it. I guess that's my best explanation of it. Is just
totally agree. Moving on to Calvin Ridley, like we said, free agent for Jacksonville. I don't know whether or not they'll move off of him, but I do know, once again, they do have to send Atlanta their 2nd round pick if they do extend him. That was a part of their deal. He's just one that is kind of getting up there in age sneakily. You don't feel like it is with the little football that he's played,
right.
But he came back after essentially a 2-year layoff. Was very good for Jacksonville. But again, it's just Michael Pittman and Mike Evans are both off the board now due to franchise tagging and being re-signed. That's going to balloon his market up, and so it's like with Jacksonville, do you take that chance in addition to giving up the capital that you'd have to when there's such a good receiver class coming in?
I would probably let him walk. I mean, I think that 2nd round pick is just his replacement. We talked about that on another show. We even talked about the fact that they could let him walk and then sign another guy and trade for like T. Higgins. I think there's better options because you're going to be overpaying because he's the number 1 receiver, and he's 30, and there's other options that are possibly just as good. Plus, you have Christian Kirk, who's serviceable. You get another guy.
We'll be back.
Huh?
Evan Ingram will be
Yeah,
back.
and
So.
they use Zay Jones, who has been a guy that's just kind of moved around, and he was good for them. So I don't see why they couldn't get some like other
Compliment
pieces
to him.
that are better than paying as much money that you would have to pay for this situation.
Right. Yeah, and kind of moving down the list, Mike Onwenu for New England, multi-position flexibility, midway through the season, moved to right tackle, still thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Not many people have that flexibility. Once you're kind of at the spot that you're at, that's where you're best.
Right.
You know, New England, we didn't know whether or not they'd franchise him. They could still bring him back, but he's probably the best interior lineman in this free agent class and one that deserves a payday. He's in his prime.
Yeah, I think he's going back to New England.
Mm-hmm.
I think New England does a pretty good job of getting these guys in the draft and then also keeping them when it's right. I don't think you're going to have to overpay him.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think matters the most is like they didn't franchise tag him. Maybe that's because they think he's not worth that price. And maybe he knows he's not truly worth that price. He hasn't had any all pros. He hasn't created some kind of buzz. He's just been very consistent, done his job, and helps them win games that they didn't really do last year. But you know what I mean? He will help them win games just by being on the field.
And it's also going to be very interesting because you see him on the screen listed as guard.
Right.
Played him at right tackle towards the end of the season. There's a massive difference between tackle salaries and guard salaries.
Right.
So maybe he feels that he needs to be right tackle in this where he's more natural, obviously coinciding with a higher payday.
Mm-hmm.
And if New England feels like, no, you're better as a guard, we want to pay you this much, then maybe that's where somebody else comes and scoops him up. But
Right.
That's one I'm not too concerned about parting ways. Leonard Williams is a guy that straight at the trade deadline to Seattle for a mid-round pick, or second-round pick, rather, entering free agency. And so that's a big concerning thing with Seattle. You typically don't see free agents walk.
Yeah.
So that would be a big loss if they aren't able to retain him. They're a team that really struggle to create pressure off the edge. It hasn't really panned out with the early draft picks that they've invested in recently. LJ Collier comes to mind. So, but they do have a lot of pieces that are free agents. Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner also. Yeah. And, they just released Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs today as well.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of holes now. So we'll see. Leonard Williams, another one that kind of came in older and shockingly 30. Didn't realize how old he was, but he's still very productive. He's not going to give you top of the end production, 20 sacks a year, but he's going to be steady for you. He kind of reminds me of DeMarcus Lawrence in the way that he produces for the team.
Right.
Great in both the run and the pass, and the stats don't always show the impact that he has.
Yeah, but in this situation, I mean, they aren't able to create enough pressure and get enough sacks. And I expect him to be back, but I don't know that he's as much of an impact player as they need him to be. Not for a second round pick, not for the price he's probably going to be worth at 30 years old. He'll probably only be there for 2 more years if he does come back. So I kind of expect, him to probably be one of the busts.
He's definitely a risk. But it's just always tough to look at, the front office when you make high-end moves of high day 2 pick or mid-round, second-round pick, and you're basically letting that walk out the door. And I need to look at what the compensatory rules are, but it's kind of hard to believe that they just get exact value for somebody that played 6-7 games for them.
Right.
So I have to look that up. Don't quote me on whether or not they'll get a high-end pick back via compensatory next draft. But yeah, that's one of the kind of interesting situations. Another guy that I think Philly made a huge mistake letting walk last free agency, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He was one that in the offseason, he was a significant name that came down with an injury, and we thought it wasn't good. He wasn't going to work out for Detroit in his 1-year prove-it deal bet on himself. But fortunately, wasn't long-term, came back, was a really, really good safety. Yeah. He's always has been, but he's always been the next tier below the big guys at the position. But he would have made a huge difference in Philly's secondary last year. He was a huge difference in Detroit's.
Yeah.
Despite, being as poor as it was, he was one of the few bright spots. So I believe he bet on himself. It worked out. He's probably going to get a lot of money because of that.
Yeah, I don't know where he's going to go, but he's one of my favorite slot safeties. Guy that can kind of do it all, moves prototypical, goes high, does it all. So I think that he's very interesting because no matter where he goes, he helps the team because he can do so many different things. He's so versatile. If they need him to play in cover 2, if they need him to play in cover 3, if they want him to walk down and play man on the slot, he can do it all. So, and he's above average at everything, which is good. It's not like he has a drop off anywhere. So, yeah, I think he's definitely an interesting guy. I don't know if the Lions have really. I'm sure they've considered bringing him back because he was helpful, but they do have issues back in the back end. Yeah. And they might decide to go corner.
Yeah, I want to invest a high dollar in a cornerback that is on the market. L'Jarius Sneed in our franchise type video, we believe will be moved on from Kansas City. Detroit makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So that's something that we didn't bring up. But moving on, we see Bryce Huff come out after a breakout year. He's very interesting just because he isn't a 3-down guy.
Yeah.
He's a pass pro specialist. Those are the guys that we see kind of risky coming out, that put up numbers, but can't rely on them all the time. And so, he had a very small sample size of high end production. So he's one of those that I think is a pretty risk. But we'll see.
I think everybody works and tries harder on their year, like the end of their contract year. And so him and I'm sorry, we just talked about him. Grenard.
Yep.
Both of them, they showed out in their 1 year, but I need consistency to be more comfortable with guys that are not necessarily first round guys. Like if they were first rounders, they needed some time to get grown up basically, and then finally they got into their own and this was the year. That's one thing, but truly we didn't see that. We saw a guy that was a third rounder and played well 1 year out of his career, but isn't going to help you in the run game.
Right.
And so it's like, it's hard to prioritize that, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows? Maybe they use him just as an edge on passing downs, but maybe he's more than that. We'll see. But I think he's very, very high risk. And I don't expect him to be back for the Jets either, but he would be on one of mine. Because we're going to recap free agency.
Yeah.
He's probably going to be one of those that gets paid a decent chunk.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at it and be like, is he worth it? So they've already kind of invested in edges that haven't worked out. I don't expect them to double down on that with their own guy. So,
right, of course.
Kind of moving on, a couple of DBs. Kendall Fuller, he's been a lone bright spot for Washington and how bad they've been in their secondary, but he's been productive. He's not one that is the reason why they're getting burnt as much. He's not getting thrown out a ton. He stayed productive. And I think he plays in a way that he can age really, really well.
Yeah. Well, Washington's defense is basically bare bones. So to be considered the one bright spot, and I mean, he was opposite a rookie, of course, but, to be considered the guy that actually could hold it down against a number one and play that well, that's important. Especially when, you're getting put up, what is it, the most points in, I don't know, how long was it?
Yeah, it was
20 years, basically, this last year. And he's not the one that's giving up the points. It's on the other DBs on the field. So
yeah, I mean, they had bright spots in the defense. I love Jonathan Allen,
right, of course,
but he also doesn't create the impact plays that a guy like Christian Wilkins or Chris Jones does. But he's a very, very solid defensive tackle. If he was on a better team, you'd know a lot more about him. He just kind of got overshadowed from the elite class when they had Chase Young and Matt Ioannidis and Deron Payne or first round defensive line. He was kind of I guess glossed over, but he's been steady for them as well. But again, one of my favorite free agents, Xavier McKinney. He is the youngest that we've come across so far. Will be 25 entering next year. And to me, he'd be a lot higher in my eyes if we were doing a free agency ranking. He's somebody that I think I would rather invest in over GJ, because he's done it every year, and he's younger, and he doesn't have as many of the plays that just kind of make you think like, all right, we have to take the good with the bad.
Right. Yeah. And I remember watching him when he came out, because this is his like free agency based on his rookie deal.
Yeah.
And he was one of the guys that you're just like, he's just good at football. You don't you never really saw him. It's not that he didn't mess up, but he was always just like in the right place. He always makes the right plays. He always does the right things. And that's hard to find, especially at a position that isn't necessarily a priority. Having someone that is so consistent and helps you so much in, stopping the run, playing different ways, being able to man slot receivers, things like that. It's not an easy position to play. It's one of the hardest positions in football to play, anywhere in the defensive backfield is. And he does it he makes it look easy. So
yeah, and we go on Marquise Brown, guy that Arizona gave up a first-round pick for, pairing him back with his college teammate Kyler Murray. Obviously did not work out. But at the same time, he's very solid wide receiver too. But to me, he always kind of was either overdrafted, or the thoughts around him were probably higher than they should have been.
Right.
And, he had a down. He's one of the few that we've come across so far that he had actually a down year in his contract year. So he might have to be one that either signs a prove-it deal, comes back to Arizona to try one more time to maximize his last big contract. But he's in his prime. He's a fast guy. Can be productive, but I think he can't be productive by himself. So he needs to have the right situation, the right quarterback, and be a complement to somebody that can take the pressure off.
Well, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, right? When he was there. I think this is too high. Just personally. I don't think that we're going to be that excited about Marquise Brown next year. And I don't think then that warrants a 15 overall, free agency pick.
I actually think it kind of depends. If you want to talk fantasy football, just a quick moment. Hypothetically, comes back, prove a deal with Kyler, who he's comfortable with, and you got, Trey McBride, and then hypothetically Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
Your second or third option, you're going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. That is probably, because of the way that you ended last year, not going to be a high pick. So he might be one of those guys that is considered still. But if he goes to, like, for example, Carolina, disaster, be on my all fade list, it just would not work to me. Remains to be seen. Moving on, going to Stephon Gilmore. He just is aged really, really well. Former Defensive Player of the Year. Had a great season with Dallas. Playoffs, blunders and all. He's been very productive. He should be, at least for the next 2-3 years, still serviceable. He's no longer a cornerback 1 on your team, but I think you can actually get him at a bargain this year. So we'll just kind of see what goes on. I'm not sure if Dallas will bring him back, just because that's probably their deepest position on that side of the ball is cornerback. So it's hard to see a scenario where he's comes back, but he'll make a lot of playoff teams happy if they sign him, and I don't think you have to break the bank.
Well, so he's aged though, and we're probably seeing the last of like him being a steady man-to-man defender. He needs to go to a good situation to me that really fits his style of play, and more zone, more and that stuff, because we did see the Romeo Dobbs cut outside, and yes, he'd been playing good all game, and then you mess up one time. So 80 plays in a game when you're on defense, one bad play, yeah, okay, but I think the consistency in man is just going down. And it does at this point. So
I'm going to go on a quick tangent here, because we're going down the list, and we got Frankie Louvu.
Yeah.
And I watched a lot of football. No idea who that is. and I'm not ashamed to admit it. So I don't want to talk or gloss over him, because if he's ranked 17th out of 101 free agents, there's a reason that he is. Stats wise, I look at it and I don't see it. But he has 100 tackles in back-to-back years. Looks like he's a edge rusher, or a pass rushing inside linebacker that's been productive for Carolina. They actually, despite being the worst team in the league, were very serviceable on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Frankie Louvu is a good player.
Yeah,
he's a good player, but I think personally, linebacker shouldn't be one of the prioritized positions in football.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you are a rusher, and he's more of like a off ball type of guy. He's quick, fast, but I don't think prioritizing it being this high is really warranted, I guess is my best way to put it. And also, yes, he is not going to be a top 15 linebacker in the league. He's not going to be a guy that you're like a household name guy, like you're thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably way too high. But
Listen, I'm sorry, Frankie. I apologize for disrespecting you.
Considering Patrick Queen is 2 picks lower, and
Yeah.
we know that name really well. He's a first rounder. We know that he has the speed, the umph. He just didn't do it he didn't do it consistently enough in Baltimore. He's 2 picks behind Frankie Louvu.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of hard. I guess on the outside looking in, I'm not seeing the reason behind it. But I think Patrick McQueen went off a second team All Pro. He's the exact guy, like you said, is somebody worth investing in. I'm not sure if it'll be with Baltimore. They just traded for and extended Roquan Smith to be the highest paid linebacker last offseason. So, yeah, I mean, good player that's young, former first round pick. But I don't know. We've seen a lot of linebackers in recent years get overpaid. And I'm just hoping that he's not a guy that makes teams regret him too soon, because he's too good of a player to be just jumping from team to team just because teams keep over investing in him.
Right. Well, there's another guy we can talk about with this situation too. It's Devin White. He'll be on this list somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And he's going to be a similar guy to what we're talking about with Patrick Queen. He's got the athleticism. He's got all that stuff. And he wasn't necessarily consistent. And he's probably going to do the same thing, get overinvested in. But yeah, I think that all these linebackers are probably normally overinvested. I like the idea of going linebacker in the second, third round in the draft and getting them that way, because normally, and also, the money matters with all of this stuff. So what are you going to pay Patrick Queen after his second team All Pro and expect him to get that same production? Right.
Yeah. And, don't want to gloss over having a couple of interior linemen, Robert Hunt, very serviceable zone blocking guard that also has tackle experience. Lloyd Cushenberry had a career year, one of the better centers in football. Denver can't afford to keep him, so he'll be an upgrade somewhere. And then look at the next tier quarterbacks. I don't know why in the hell Jacoby Brissett is above Baker Mayfield, but he is. I've always liked him as a backup quarterback.
Which is needed nowadays.
First statement in his paragraph, I don't agree with at all. But he, to me, is one of the better backups that you feel comfortable with. I give him in the Gardner Minshew tier,
of course,
of guys. He's not a starter in this league. He's been given opportunities to do so because it seems like everywhere he goes, he gets an opportunity because somebody goes down.
Right.
And he hasn't done enough to keep that opportunity going forward. He will be in this league for at least 5 more years to me, but Baker Mayfield is that dude.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield
had a career,
definitely should be above.
Season.
It's wild.
He's younger, just knocked off the NFC champs, then almost took out Detroit on the road, throwing for over 350. Mike Evans is coming back. I expect him to return to Tampa, but he bet on himself after the Carolina into the Rams situation, he's yeah.
He better get paid better than Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, I don't get that at all. But again, we're not ranking stuff. We're just glossing over who is. He deserves to get paid. He's one of the top 20 quarterbacks in football.
Yeah.
Probably closer to the 14 to 18 range.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Take your pick. We can do rankings later. But yeah, he deserves to get paid. He's 29. Tampa should be excited having him as their quarterback because he's the perfect personality fit for that team. They're very loose, kind of go with the flow. That's why Jameis worked.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't get in his own way,
it
would have worked. I mean, the very next year after moving off him, they won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. So that just shows the difference of somebody that is there to do the things the right way and guy who is being a little reckless and not maximizing his talent. Mm-hmm. Baker maximizes his talent. There's no doubt he should be a buck next year. If he's not, he's going to be an upgrade somewhere at quarterback or somebody else.
Yeah.
A couple of risks. In my eyes, Derrick Henry has been the best running back in football for a while, or probably has had the best career of any running back since the LT era of running backs, Adrian Peterson. Since then, probably best career. Multiple 2,000-yard seasons, leading leagues in touchdowns. He did take a step back this year from an efficiency standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
He's also a guy that I've always kind of had I hold it against him a little bit that you can't invest every single dollar in him because when you are trailing, he's not on the field.
Right, of course.
That's not saying that he's not a great pass blocker, but he's just kind of a no-show as a receiver.
Right.
And in this day and age, you need a scat back that can do both, especially when a lot of teams like to run hurry up or 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
He's one I think a playoff caliber team would love to have, but I would be very wary of it. Baltimore makes sense. Dallas makes sense for what it's worth. But again, I don't feel great about it if either of those teams or one team that is in a similar position to them invest in him.
Yeah, I think, with him, it's like I feel like we should know what we're going to get, right? I mean, this last season was probably pretty indicative of what's going on going forward, where he wasn't as efficient as he had been in the past. But, people are going to take name value as the most important thing. And, well, he's got the name value. Just he's, like you said, multiple 2,000-yard rushing seasons. Like, if you think you can reach that, I think you're very mistaken. Maybe 1,000 yards, maybe 1,000 yards, right? So
I think he's gonna be. If you had to, I guess, press me on what his kind of production will be, it's gonna be what James Conner's has been the last couple of years, where he's like 800-ish yards, over 10 touchdowns, good goal line back, but you're gonna wish that you had more in most games,
right?
But yeah, and then moving on, Gabe Davis, he's been very high-low in his tenure with Buffalo. I don't even know if he's established himself as a wide receiver too. But when we looked all the way up after, again, Pittman and Evans are off the board now, Calvin Ridley's there, and then it drops all the way to Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
That's
Marquise Brown, but yes. Then,
yes.
Right. Of course.
But yeah, Gabe Davis, young, 25. He just
disappears in games. Like there's times where, you're like, okay, Gabe Davis caught the ball 4 times. He has 100+ yards. Okay, cool. But that's not necessarily sustainable. Mm-hmm. And then he goes into the next game. He's got one for like 11 and you're like, oh, well, where'd he go? Also in Buffalo, it's a little difficult to throw the ball sometimes. And that can also affect you, but didn't really affect Stephon Diggs. So until the end of this year, till the end of this year when it got cold.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure what to do with Gabe Davis. I'm not necessarily in on him as a player. And I think he has to be a number 2, like you said, or maybe even a number 3. Maybe that's the best fit. Yeah. I want to talk about the next guy on the list that probably should not be here.
I mean, the next two edge rushers, 2 very different stages of their careers.
Yeah.
Chase Young, former top 3 pick that he got traded for a mid-round pick to San Fran at the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really maximize his opportunity. On the other side of Nick Bosa, you wouldn't think that you'd have to do a ton to make a name for yourself, and he just kind of really disappeared down the stretch.
Yeah. He frustrates me a lot because I watch him play, and he reminds me of Jadeveon Clowney. Literally.
The paragraph.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, there you
Didn't
go.
even see it.
Reminds me of Jadeveon Clowney. Literally, half the time I'm like, oh, I've got a star. The next play, I'm like, what are you doing?
Mhm.
There was a play I watched where he's running down a running back, and he could have caught him. He's like walking, jogging over there. Running back cuts back, walks in, literally runs in front of him, like this close. Nothing. Doesn't even move.
Mhm.
And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, do you want to be the highest paid edge in the game? Because you can. You can. You have the ability.
Mhm.
So what's happening here? Coming out, he's good at everything. He's still good at everything when he plays hard.
Mhm.
So he's a really frustrating guy, but he still is warranted more money than the other two pass rushers from above.
I think if there's any candidates that are more likely than not to get approved a deal, it's probably him.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if he did enough for anybody to be like, oh yeah, I want to take a chance. Because it's really because of the inconsistency and how he just kind of disappears. It's like, I feel like he is on the verge of turning into Jadeveon Clowney, who right after Houston, where he underwhelmed next to J.J. Watt, he basically went to a team every different year.
Yeah.
And yeah, he being the 8th best player on defense for Baltimore, very productive. But why are you on your 5th team before you're 30 as a number one overall pick?
Yeah.
And I'm worried about Chase Young being in a similar path. Zadarius Smith, it just kind of feels like no one wants to invest long term. He's not a big name, but he's always been productive.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 3 years, 3 different teams, but he was just lights out as a second best pass rusher on your team next to Dylan Hunter and then next to Myles Garrett.
Yeah, you might just get a steal here on price.
Yeah.
And that's the cool part about him is he might be old, but he's like that like Michael Bennett when he was playing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that kind of style. Like I'm just gonna go to work and I'm gonna go play hard and I'm gonna win 9 times this year and make sacks. Okay, go for it. Full speed ahead, buddy. You know? And so he's a guy I mean I've always liked, and I think he's gonna continue being serviceable and gonna continue making money and making teams better. So yeah, nothing there.
Yeah, and Josh Jacobs, similar boat to Saquon to a lesser extent, had a down year. Finished the year on the injury list, but he is a year younger. 2022 rushing champ. What do you make of it? Is he closer to the higher risk like Derrick Henry is, or is he like I'll invest in him, Saquon?
I'm not here to judge this list, right? We just talked about that, but Derrick Henry's above him.
Yeah,
and I think that's crazy considering he's in his prime. He's not 28 years old, 29 years old. He's in his prime. He had a rushing title, so we know he can do it. I think you invest in him, but what we're going to have to invest in him in this class is not going to be worth it to me. I like Josh Jacobs as a player. I really do. I'm a Raiders fan. I like Josh Jacobs as a player, but I think his hype is too much for what his ability is. And he didn't have miles on like when he came out of college, he had barely any rushes. He was like
his last year was huge, and that's what vaulted him to a first round pick.
Yeah,
he didn't have the 3-year run that Najee had.
Right. He wasn't, but yeah, Damian Harris, Najee, they were all there while he was there. So he just sat in the wings and waited. And then all of a sudden he comes in 1 year, does well, gets put in the first round to the Raiders. And from there, I just think his hype's too high. And that's okay. Like, he's still a good running back. He's just going to get overpaid, and that team is
going to improve a team next year. Is he worth the investment?
Right.
We'll just kind of gloss over the next 10 or so. Jordan Brooks, very young linebacker that had an up and down start. He was overdrafted as a first round pick, but he's really kind of come into his own. I expect him to be one of the higher prioritized linebackers.
Right.
Andrew Van Ginkel was on a way to a career year, and then he had a season-ending injury when the Dolphins' just whole front seven got decimated towards the end of the season. So he's a guy that probably, depth at pass rusher is somebody goes to a really solid team. Levante David's still going. He's just highly productive, Hall of Fame path. Everybody needs a linebacker like him, so he makes every situation better. Cameron Curl, again, how do you have Kendall Fuller and Cameron Curl and just give up 32 a game, mostly through the air? I just don't understand it. But he's young, he's 25.
Well, it hurts when you get rid of your top sack production and send him to the Bears. Montez Sweat led in sacks on both teams. He wasn't there the whole time, so.
Yeah, and then, Jadeveon Clowney we just mentioned, but, signing one-year deals with different teams every year, and we're just kind of in that range of free agent veteran now, John Simpson. Just kind of a late-round pick, came out of nowhere. You don't know if it's the system in which Baltimore runs or him. We'll just kind of see. Hunter Henry, he just kind of was a guy that was on a trajectory to become one of the top 5 tight ends in football.
Right.
He just had a string of injuries, and now it's just he's serviceable, but just kind of has been overlooked. But I've always liked him as a player. Andre James, you're familiar with, one of the better linemen over the last few years for the Raiders.
He's a Raider, he's the style. So hopefully he gets re-signed for sure.
Fletcher Cox, probably one of the biggest veterans that is still near his prime in this range. I would anticipate him going back to Philly, but if he doesn't, look out.
Yeah.
Josh Uche, he just has no snaps. Like he's a designated pass rusher, and
not worth spending the money on.
He's
to me.
high risk.
Yeah,
but he was productive in his role. Now his role has to be expanded, but I feel like he's like more of Carl Lawson than he is.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think with all these guys that we keep talking about that are only pass rushers, I'm okay with them if I get them on their rookie deal. I'm not okay with them if I have to pay them, because of the fact that they aren't on the field. I don't want to pay a guy that isn't on the field more than the guy that's on the field. So
and Julian Blackmon was a promising safety. Just coming off an Achilles injury, he's going to have to prove it somewhere, whether that be with Indy or not. Aziz Al-Shair, that just shows the depth that San Fran just always drafts good linebackers. But he had a prove it deal with Tennessee, was one of the lead leaguers in tackles. Indianapolis, another one, Kenny Moore, very, very one of the best slot corners in football. He's still 29. Curtis Samuel is one of our favorite slot receivers, but he's just kind of a little up and down.
Yeah.
And you can't expect him to even be a wide receiver too. But he just kind of feels like he always kind of comes out of nowhere when you least expect. And then, Grover Stewart, Kevin Dotson, most notable name, Tony Pollard in this range. Awful season. And he just isn't that guy to be. He's a serviceable, one of the best running back 2s you can have.
Yeah, 1B.
And don't expect apologies from anybody that thought he was better than Zeke, but Zeke outplayed him, and Zeke was way older and slower. And
Zeke's style of play makes more sense to the NFL.
Yes.
That's just what it is.
Just moving on. Dallas should probably be moving on as well. I'm not sure where he goes, but if he goes for somewhere reasonably priced and is a compliment or shares the workload with somebody, as an example, Tennessee, they have a young guy in the wings, but somebody that's probably not, an every down guy. Those kinds of compliments is probably where he'll be best served. Trent Brown's kind of bounced back and forth between the Raiders and the Patriots over the last few years. Solid tackle. Dealt with some injuries, but he's above average starter at the position. DJ Reader, Dorrance Armstrong, Jonah Williams, just list goes on. And then now you're just kind of getting into the guys that are depth pieces.
Yeah.
They're not going to be huge salary guys that just kind of come out of nowhere, but I mean their depth. Calais Campbell is somehow still kicking. Connor Williams should be much higher, but he again tore his ACL late.
Right.
You don't know if he'll be ready, but he was having a great year in Miami. Jonah Jackson's always been a good run blocker on the best line in football. We'll see if he comes back. Kevin Zeiler, this is a big, shows a lot of depth at the guard position. Darnell Mooney has just been, Steven Nelson, he was the one that had the pick six in the playoffs.
Yep.
Always
Against the
been
Browns.
very, very solid corner. Christian Fulton is a former top pick that just really has just not played well.
Nope.
He probably had the worst year, one of the worst contract years you could possibly have. Again, you're going to have to prove it somewhere.
Yep.
Drew Tranquil, very solid linebacker for Kansas City.
Yeah.
That just kind of shows how much Devin White's fallen off because he's ranked below him. He's similar to Patrick Queen, but he just hasn't had the breakout year.
Yeah.
Since their Super Bowl run that you would have expected. So, very good player that I just wish would play up to his strengths.
Yeah.
Dory Jackson's been a guy that has a lot of potential, but he kind of got overpaid when he last was a free agent when he went to the Giants. He's one of those guys that you need depth. Ryan Tannehill is going to be a backup somewhere, and I feel good if he comes in for a few games. I still think he has that kind of capability. Marcus Davenport, former first-round pick, that just has not panned out. He's depth. Bobby Wagner, still kicking. Very good player. A couple of safeties, Jordan Fuller and Jeremy Chin, that are solid, steady.
Yeah.
KJ Osborne had a great year. Made the most of his opportunity. Anytime that Adam Thielen went down, as of 2 years ago, or Justin Jefferson missed half the year this year, Jordan Addison dealt with some injuries, and KJ Osborne always stepped up. He makes big plays when they count. He's not going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, but I enjoy him on my team as a wide receiver 3.
Yeah, as a 3 for sure.
Josh Ninman and John Runyon, both from Green Bay. They're going to need some depth on that offensive line. If they lose both of them, Geno Stone.
Whoa.
Wow. Just seven interceptions out of nowhere. But again,
I'm just surprised he's so low.
Yeah.
That's actually surprising that he is down here compared to the guys we just talked about.
Yeah. Obviously, he's just coming off a career year, but he's not a marquee name, and he really, other than that, if you didn't have that number 7 next to your stat sheet, you're probably not even in the top 100. But
right. But I don't think he's a top 25 guy, but maybe he's in the 30s, right?
Yeah. So, Shaquille Barrett probably can still be a good depth piece at pass rusher. Yeah. Same with Leonard Floyd. Noah Fant is a former first rounder that just has not found footing anywhere. He's basically OJ Howard to me.
Yeah.
Willie Gay, I'm actually surprised he isn't.
Yeah, wow, that's crazy too. He's behind Drew Tranquil.
So explosive.
Yeah.
Young linebacker that he's going to get paid somewhere.
Okay.
DeAndre Swift.
There's another linebacker down there.
Josie Jewell. Keyshawn Nixon. He's a bit of a combo of a Swiss Army knife on the defensive end, also really good special teams player. We see Russell Wilson. He should be much higher.
Yeah.
And it's not because of his talent, but because he's free.
Yeah, because of money. When
you're getting to pay your starting quarterback the minimum, which is what he will be paid, that's why you are the biggest bargain. You shouldn't be 79.
Yeah.
If you're expecting him to get paid, yeah, he's probably where he should be. Mm-hmm. But he's way, way too low based on what you're going to only have to spend for him.
Right.
He's still a top 25 quarterback. I don't know where he's going to go. Because,
makes the team better, though.
Yeah, he's going to make his team better, and he's going to help build a better team because of how cheap he is.
Right, exactly.
Odell Beckham was my least favorite free agent signing last year because of how much they paid. And obviously he is a popular name, but he just doesn't have the production to be a high-paid receiver. And because of his talents, he's probably going to still expect high dollar,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't deserve it anymore.
Oh,
And
his ranking is probably accurate.
His ranking is accurate because somebody might overpay him again because of the name.
Yeah.
And let's actually look up real quick. When's the last time he had a 1,000-yard season? Because I can't even remember. It's been as long as it has. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
Since he had his 1,000-yard season, and he had 4 touchdowns that year, and he barely broke 1,000. Barely broke 1,000 the year before. The year before that, he had 300 yards. We haven't seen an elite Odell Beckham Jr. since 2016.
Yeah.
We started to with the Rams when he was moved there, and unfortunately had another injury
yeah.
out of his control. But at the same time, he just is not worth the investment. That's why he's as low as he is, and I just wouldn't take a chance if the money isn't right. Austin Eckler is that low, and he deserves to be that low. Don't look at the fantasy stats that he's had. He had one of the worst seasons at the running back position. He's aging fast. Jordan Whitehead, I'm actually shocked is that low.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
27.
Another strong safety class. But yeah, he's been very solid. J.K. Dobbins is just somebody that's just never quit the injury bug.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. It's hard to even say I'd invest in him, but he's somebody that he needs to be a 1B, and we'll just kind of see where it goes from there.
Sad because he had all the ability. That was the part that sucks. It's like sometimes people just can't get over the injury bug, but when he was playing good, or when he was playing, it was good.
Yeah, and then we got Brandon Graham. Still, it's going to be his last season. He's probably going to come back to Philly. So I'm just going to gloss over him. Tyler Boyd, still has an above average slot receiver. I don't know if he'll be back with Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely won't if they keep T. Higgins, but I like him. Jameis Winston just frustrates the hell out of me. Josh Jones is a former higher or third round pick as a tackle. He's just kind of gone back and forth on both tackle spots. It just hasn't wowed you.
Yeah, and they have a problem at tackle, and they're still letting him walk. That tells you a lot about what they feel with him.
Yeah, and you got Alohi Gilman. He kind of came out of nowhere this year. Former 6th round pick. He just plays well. Gardner Minshew. I really hope Indy re-signs him. He had a great year. He's gonna continue. He's the ideal backup that I think you should want. And Tyrod Taylor, somehow still in the league. He's just kind of does the right thing so that he still kind of jumps around.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's any longer a guy that I would love to have as my backup. Micah Hyde. We should also mention that Jordan Poyer and several other bills were released today. Tre'Davious White was released. Yeah. So those aren't appearing here, but those will be priority free agents.
Yeah.
That'll knock some of these guys down. But Micah Hyde, aging, still productive. Tyler Tart, don't know much about him, but he's just kind of a mid-price depth piece. Anthony Jennings,
another
Blake Cashman, Daquan Jones, Andrews Pete. That actually shocks me with how low he is because he actually played well at tackle last year.
Yeah.
Replacing Terran Armstead, and he's only 30. I don't know why he's that low. I didn't see anything in PFF that showed that he struggled that much. Actually, Tre'Davious White is that low.
Wow.
But again, coming off very significant injuries.
Okay.
I don't know. I would take a flyer.
Yeah.
I would definitely take a flyer.
Like over some of the guys we've seen? So, yeah. Absolutely.
Ahkello Witherspoon played very well as a starter. He's just kind of been a journeyman. Emmanuel Ogbah has been a very quality depth piece.
Yep. I
mentioned earlier, Devin Singletary was very productive towards the end of the year. He's just a guy, but very good compliment. Excuse me. And then we got Michael Thomas, former best receiver in the league that just cannot stay healthy.
Yep.
So, just to gloss over, that's some of the best names available. It's a fluid list because there could be some shocking names. We're still going to see more releases happen the rest of the week. But that's just kind of give you an idea of who's available, who could be on the move as we enter the 2024 offseason.
Right. And it should be a fun free agency. We're going to get, of course, as much information to y'all as possible. We're going to try to stay as up to date as possible. We're going to have most of that stuff going on Twitter. Making sure we catch all the free agent signings and stuff. So check it out there. Go to our Discord, like, subscribe, comment, turn the little notification bell on so you can see all of our videos when they pop up. And we appreciate y'all being part of the discussion and being here with us.
Yeah, appreciate you guys' time. Go watch our other videos. We just came out with a bunch of other content for the draft and both for outlooks for the off season for every team and every division. So tell us what you think. Tell us down below who's some of the free agents to stick out to you. Who's on the move that you would want your team to invest to. Let us know that. Let's start discussing. It's time to start building this community.
Yep. Thank y'all. We appreciate it.
Y'all take care.